I'm Olivia, 36, and at my own brother's wedding they left me standing without a seat as if I didn't matter. They laughed, they whispered, they thought I'd stay quiet. But what no one in that ballroom knew was this: everything they were celebrating under every chandelier above their heads already belonged to me. I let them mock me. I let them push me aside, but I was waiting. Hey. Because sometimes the one you dismiss holds the one secret that can bring the whole family to its knees. And when I finally revealed it in the middle of their perfect night, nothing would ever be the same again. The moment I walked into the Grand Haven ballroom, the brightness nearly blinded me. Chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, scattering light across every sequin, every glass. A string quartet played something elegant and restrained, the kind of music chosen to impress. The air smelled faintly of orchids, fresh and expensive. Every detail whispered money, status, perfection. I smoothed the navy dress I had chosen. It wasn't Paris couture, not the sort that came with a waiting list and headlines. But it was mine, tailored, simple, understated. Still surrounded by gowns that shimmered like waterfalls and tuxedos pressed to perfection, I felt out of place, as if I had been dropped into someone else's painting, the brushstroke that didn't belong. And then Jacob spotted me. "Olivia," he said, lips tilting into a half-smile. His tuxedo clung to him like it had been cut precisely for his frame. He looked me over quickly, then glanced away as though already searching for someone more interesting. "You made it." His eyes flicked toward the far side of the ballroom. A shadowed corner, empty, no chairs. "That spot suits you. No seat, but you'll manage." The chuckle that followed wasn't light-hearted. It was a dismissal. I forced a smile, small and polite, though inside something sharp twisted. It had been years since I stood face to face with my brother. Years filled with work-distance silence. Yet here I was, and to him I was still the same someone to be pushed to the edge. Then my mother arrived. Dolores Pearls glowing under the chandelier, her perfume arriving before she did. She looked me up and down, slow and deliberate, the way one might inspect a flaw on fine china. "You should be grateful Jacob remembered to invite you," she said smoothly. Her hand lifted to touch her necklace as though to remind me of its worth. "That dress, it looks like something you'd find on a clearance rack." The words slid in deeper than Jacob's laugh. My palms grew warm, my breath slowed. To them I was still invisible. The daughter who had gone overseas to work in hotels, scraping by, nothing worth mentioning. They didn't know the truth. Not yet. Around me, guests floated toward their tables, guided by place cards and candlelight. Waiters weaved through with champagne glasses, clinking laughter spilling like music. Every chair was taken, every seat accounted for. Except mine. Because I didn't have one. I lingered near the wall, pretending to admire the towering floral displays. My clutch buzzed softly. I slipped my phone out, tilted it discreetly. A message flashed across the screen from my assistant: overseas deal closed. Dubai confirmed. A quiet surge rose inside me. Another property added. Another piece of the empire built brick by brick. I tucked the phone away. Not tonight. Not yet. And then Samantha appeared. The bride. The crown jewel of this evening. She glided across the room in her gown, light bending around her, as if the fabric itself commanded attention. Pearls, beads, crystals, all catching the glow, all ensuring she would never be missed. Guests whispered as she passed, their eyes locked, their admiration given freely. When she reached me, her smile bloomed soft and sugary. But the sweetness was only surface. "Oh, Olivia," she cooed. Her gaze swept down from my hair to my shoes, deliberate, assessing. "I hope you don't mind standing. We saved the best seats for important guests." Her hand touched my arm lightly, the way someone might pat a child before sending them off. Then she turned, drawing her glow back to the waiting crowd. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, not openly, but it was complicated. It was the sound of people agreeing with her silence, rewarding her with their chuckles because she had given them permission. I swallowed. My mind raced with all the things I could say. One sentence and I could shatter her performance. I could tell them the chandeliers above the marble beneath the staff weaving between tables, it all belonged to me. I could claim it, and their faces would crumble. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I smiled thin and practiced and turned toward the very corner Jacob had chosen for me. The shadows stretched long there, the chandelier's glow barely reaching. They thought they had stripped me of dignity, that they had taken away my seat, my place, my worth. But this was the beginning. I lowered myself into the corner, back straight, chin high. Music rose again, laughter rippled across the room, glasses lifted and clinked. My hand brushed against the cool painted wall. I smiled to myself. Every inch of this ballroom was mine. Tonight they gave me no seat, but soon every seat in this room would be mine. From that corner of the ballroom the string quartet kept playing, but in my ears the notes shifted. They became the whistle of my father calling out from the sidelines, the roar of clapping when Jacob scored another goal. That applause had never once been for me. I was 7 when I first noticed our house was split in two. Not by walls, but by expectations. Jacob was the heir, the boy who could do no wrong. My father called him the future, and my mother echoed every word. They clapped when he tied his shoes, neatly smiled when he shook an uncle's hand. Even his mistakes became stories about potential. And me, I was the quiet one. The girl with her nose in books, scribbling notes in margins. I worked shifts at a diner from 15, saving every tip in a jar until I could afford a second-hand laptop. I thought they'd be proud. Instead, my mother would sigh. Olivia reading won't put food on the table. Be practical. Dinner time was the real theater. Jacob would sit tall, announcing plans for his next project, and my parents leaned in as if he were a keynote speaker at a grand conference. I still remember one night clearly. Jacob spoke about opening a small shop. He barely finished before my father clapped him on the back. My mother's eyes gleamed as she promised they'd cover the first round of money. The table buzzed with pride. That same week I came home with a letter, a full scholarship. One of the top universities in the state had chosen me. I believed just for a second that this would be my moment. My mother read it, her lips tight. She shook her head. Why waste time on theory? You're a girl. You need stability, not ambition. The words landed deeper than she knew. It wasn't disappointing. It was a dismissal. I tried once more. That night, courage trembling in me, I asked my father, why do you always back Jacob and not me? Why can't I have the same chance? He looked at me without hesitation. Not cruel, but final. Jacob is the one who'll carry this family forward. You just need to find steady work and a good household. That's enough. Enough. That single word stayed with me longer than any applause for Jacob. It was a verdict. A ceiling pressed down over me. After that, I stopped bringing my victories to the table. I folded them away, carried them in silence. When Jacob got funds for his shop, I found ways to build on my own piece by piece. When he had doors opened for him, I learned to carve doors into solid walls. Years passed. My path carried me far beyond our town, across oceans, through hotel lobbies they'd never stepped into. They thought I was just getting by. They never asked because they didn't want to know. But the truth was simple. Every hour I spent ignored became a brick. Every sigh, every shake of the head, every careless word, they were stones I used to build my own foundation. I could still see that dinner table. Jacob glowing, my parents glowing right along with him, while my plate sat untouched. My father's voice calm and sure. Jacob is the future. You just need something steady. But now, standing in this ballroom with chandeliers scattering light over marble floors, I knew better. The future wasn't at that family table. The future was here, in my hands, in every polished corner of this hotel. That night at the table had been my first climax, even if I didn't know it. The moment I realized no help would ever come, that I would have to be my own foundation, that if I wanted more, I would have to create it. The music pulled me back into the present. Laughter rippled across the ballroom. Jacob moved easily through the crowd, parents at his side, the same glow they'd carried since our childhood. They still had no idea. Those memories weren't just scars. They were fuel. Fuel I had refined into something unbreakable. And tonight, right here in this hall, They were about to learn the cost of underestimating me all those years. I slipped into the preparation suite behind the ballroom, and the noise hit me like a wall. Laughter, perfume, the rustle of silk and tulle. The room smelled of roses and expensive hairspray. At the center stood Samantha, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, glowing in her wedding gown. The fabric shimmered under the lights covered in crystals that scattered sparks across the mirrors. Her bridesmaids hovered close, fussing with her veil, adjusting pearls, refilling champagne. They circled her like courtiers around a queen. The whole thing looked like it had been pulled straight from a bridal magazine. And then there was me lingering at the doorway in my navy dress, the kind of shadow you ignore in a room built for light. Samantha saw me almost instantly. Her gaze slid down my dress, slow and deliberate, before she smiled with that practiced sweetness that always hides a sting. "Olivia," she said, her voice pitched high syrupy. "So glad you made it. We weren't sure if you'd bother." I stepped inside steady. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice level. She twirled the skirt, fanning out like a wave of diamonds. The bridesmaids gasped, as if they had rehearsed. This dress was flown in from Paris. It took 3 months of handwork. Every detail is custom, worth every penny. She paused, savoring the hush before her eyes flicked toward me. "And yours? How practical. If we run short on servers tonight, you'll blend right in." The laughter was soft, but sharp enough to cut. My jaw tightened. My nails pressed into my palm. I wanted so badly to say it that this hotel was mine, that her perfect night rested on contracts signed by me. But I stayed silent. Before I could even breathe, my mother's voice floated in smooth and cold. "Samantha, dear, don't tease too hard. Olivia never cared about appearances. She's never really done anything worth dressing up for. Think of her as a humble accent tonight." That struck harder than Samantha's jab. My own mother reducing me to background decoration in my brother's wedding. My chest felt tight, but I didn't move. The bridesmaids giggled, hiding behind polished nails. Samantha leaned closer to one of them and stage whispered, "Bless her. At least she showed up." It's sweet, really. Sweet. That word had never been meant for me. The chatter rolled on without pause. Samantha's cousin bragged about her shoes from Milan. Another bridesmaid whined about her manicure not matching her gown. Through it all, I stood there like wallpaper. Present, visible, ignored. Every careless remark stretched the minutes, pressing me further out of their circle. But under the dismissal, something steadier was built. A stillness. A decision. I lifted my chin and forced a small smile. "Congratulations," I said. The words came out clean, steady. Not a tremor. Inside, though, I felt the shift. The silence they mistook for weakness, it was turning into something stronger. I turned to leave. But Samantha's voice followed me, light and sharp. "Oh, Olivia, did you know I worked with the management here for months to make this night flawless? They said I had a natural gift for events. Maybe one day I'll help you get a proper job in this industry." Laughter bubbled again, smug and shallow. But her words stopped me mid-step. Because I knew. I knew the contracts, the numbers, the bookings. I knew exactly how inflated her perfect package had been. Samantha thought she was boasting. She didn't realize she'd just revealed she'd been played. I tucked that fact away, smiling wider as I walked out. Let her have her illusion for now, because soon the truth would turn every laugh, every smirk in this glittering room back on them. The ballroom glittered like a jewel box when I stepped back inside. Light spilled from chandeliers, splashing over white linen tables crowned with roses. Laughter carried over the clink of glasses, a chorus of voices weaving stories, toasts, and inside jokes. Every table was full, every seat occupied. Except none of them were mine. I scanned the room, careful, trying not to look desperate. My name wasn't on the front rows where uncles and aunts settled with pride. Not in the middle where cousins leaned close, buzzing with gossip. Not even at the back where acquaintances I hadn't seen in years traded polite nods. My place card didn't exist. Then Aunt Linda appeared. She had that smile sharp as her tongue, the one she wore whenever she thought she'd scored the upper hand in family theater. She tilted her head. gesturing toward a lonely table tucked against the entry doors, practically touching the kitchen corridor. "Olivia," she cooed, "why don't you sit there quieter? Less pressure. You'll be more comfortable." The words dripped honey, but the sting underneath was clear. A couple at the nearest table chuckled, eyes flicking toward me before darting away as if they'd been caught enjoying a private joke. I gave a small nod, forcing my face into calm, and walked toward the table. It was set for one. No flowers, no polished silverware, just a plain cloth and a single chair. From here I could hear trays clattering, doors swinging, cooks calling out orders. Garlic and oil hung in the air, spilling through each crack of the kitchen door. I pulled out the chair and sat. My spine-straight chin lifted, though inside the heat of humiliation burned steady. The chandeliers glowed warm over the tables of family and friends, while I sat in shadows hidden by the kitchen doors. But from here I saw what they didn't. A server wobbles under a tray of glasses. Another whispered harshly to a colleague after mixing up wine service. The banquet managers stomped through voice-sharp snapping orders until hands trembled. Plates delayed, glasses, chipped forks mismatched. They were my staff, my people. They didn't know who I was, not yet. But every mistake they made tonight would land on my desk in the morning. I folded my hands in my lap, leaning back. They thought they'd banished me to the outskirts of the celebration. In reality, they'd given me the clearest view in the house, every crack in the polished surface laid bare in front of me. That was when my cousin strolled by. He bent low, grinning as though confiding a joke. "At least you're near the kitchen. If you get hungry, you can always beg for extra bread." He winked and moved on, leaving a trail of chuckles behind him. My jaw tightened. I breathed slowly, refusing to flinch. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Then my clutch buzzed. I slipped my phone out the screen, glowing in the dim. A message from my assistant: "Overseas congratulations. Grand Horizon acquisition closed. Value 1.2B. I stared at it once, twice, 3 times. The number gleamed back, steady, unshakable. 1.2 billion. A deal that could buy and sell every chandelier in this room 10 times over. I let out a breath, slow and measured, as the corners of my mouth curved upward. The laughter, the whispers, the pity, they all shrank against that figure glowing on my screen. Sliding the phone back into my clutch, I lifted my head. Across the ballroom, guests toasted Jacob and Samantha, oblivious to the reality humming inches from my hand. They thought they'd hidden me away, silenced me in a shadowed seat. But the truth had just arrived, undeniable, larger than all of them. I pressed my palms lightly on the table's edge, calm, steady. From this so-called exile, I was gathering everything, every slight, every oversight, every insult. They didn't realize they were staging the perfect prelude for me. The music swelled as waiters finally carried out the first course. Guests clapped forks, tapped against crystal. At my table, no one stopped, no one spoke. My plate came last, lukewarm, dropped carelessly in front of me without a word. I smiled, quiet, amused now. They thought they'd cast me aside. But I knew better, because what they didn't understand was simple sitting alone tonight wasn't my humiliation. It was the beginning of theirs. The reception had reached its rhythm. The chandeliers glowed warm and steady, and the hum of conversation rose in waves that rolled over polished marble. Silverware clinked, champagne glasses sparkled, and laughter spilled like a never-ending toast. From my table tucked near the edge, I watched the night circle around Jacob, as if the entire room were revolving just for him. He stood at the center, tuxedo fitted to perfection, Samantha's hand looped through his arm like a decorative jewel. Guests gathered close, leaning in, eager for a moment in his orbit. Old business associates he barely knew, distant cousins who hadn't called in years, everyone wanted their piece of Jacob, and he let them have it, basking in the glow as if the light truly belonged to him. Then he raised his glass. His voice carried smoothly through the microphone, polished, deliberate. "Thanks to Samantha, I've been introduced to some of the most powerful names in real estate. Her family has opened doors I never thought possible. With their support, I'm excited about all the opportunities ahead for our family business." Applause thundered. People clapped like they were watching the birth of a dynasty. Smiles widened, heads nodded, admiration floated heavy in the air. And then came Dolores, my mother, always ready to drive the point deeper. She leaned toward the microphone pearls, catching the light, her voice wrapped in poise. Jacob has always had a gift for business, she said, pausing just long enough to let pride swell. Then her eyes flicked briefly toward me, sharp as a blade, before sliding back to her audience. Olivia, well, she keeps herself busy, works in hotels somewhere in Asia. A nice distraction, I suppose. The room filled with a ripple of polite laughter. Short, controlled, but enough to sting. In that instant, years of work, years of flying between continents, cutting deals that reshaped skylines, managing properties that held thousands of jobs, collapsed into a throwaway line. A distraction. To them, my life's work was nothing more than a hobby. I gripped the stem of my glass, steadying it, though my pulse hammered. My smile didn't falter, but inside the words scorched. Then my cousin leaned across, his voice syrupy with pity. Don't take it too hard, Olivia. Not everyone is meant to shine like Jacob. Every family needs one star. He patted my shoulder as if he'd offered comfort, as if being relegated to the shadows was something I should accept. The weight pressed heavier, but I didn't move. My silence was its own kind of shield. The ballroom buzzed on. Waiters circled with refills. Guests leaned into conversations, their laughter rising higher. Samantha laughed too loudly at something Jacob whispered, her hand pressing his arm in a practiced show of devotion. My mother clapped along, pride painted across her face. And I, their daughter, their sister, sat in a chair they had chosen to forget. For a fleeting moment, I almost rose. I could have cut through the room, walked straight to the microphone, and ended the charade. My phone, sitting quietly in my clutch, held the documents. Contracts, transfers, proof. Every chandelier above every inch of polished floor, beneath every waiter gliding through the crowd. This was mine. All of it. I pictured it. The gasps, the silence breaking like glass, the way every smile would vanish. My hand slipped into my bag, brushing the smooth edge of the phone. The weight of it felt like power ready to be unleashed, but I stopped. Instead, I tightened my grip on the glass in front of me. Cool water steadied me more than fire ever could. Not yet, because power revealed too early is power wasted. And tonight, they were too busy celebrating illusions to notice the truth sitting in the shadows. Jacob raised his glass again, his voice full of certainty soaking in the applause as if it were oxygen. Samantha leaned in, radiant and triumphant. Dolores clapped. Robert nodded, the picture of a family convinced of its own story. They didn't see me. Not really. But I let their dismissal settle into me, not as pain, but as something sharper. Fuel. Every careless word was a brick on the foundation I had been building for years. I placed my glass down crisp against the white linen and straightened my shoulders. If they wanted me invisible, I'd give them invisibility. For now. But soon, they wouldn't just see me. They would have no choice but to face me. I sat at the lonely table by the entrance, where the laughter from the main floor rolled toward me in waves I wasn't meant to ride. The music swelled, glasses clinked, and for a moment I wondered if anyone noticed I hadn't spoken more than a handful of words all night. The wine in my glass had gone flat bitter, but I sipped anyway. It kept my hands steady. That's when I saw her, Karen, the hotel manager, standing stiffly near the back corner. Normally she glided through a room like this, checking details, smoothing edges, her smile as crisp as the linens. But tonight her expression was tight, almost stricken. Her eyes weren't on the guests or the staff. They were on me. I didn't have to guess why. Before I could linger on it, a cluster of Samantha's friends swept toward my table, sequins, sparkling perfume trailing. They carried the kind of brightness that wasn't warm, it was blinding sharp. One of them leaned forward, her earrings catching the light as they swayed. "So, Olivia," she asked the question, syrupy but barbed. "What exactly do you do these days?" I parted my lips to answer, but my mother was quicker. Dolores slid into the conversation, pearls bouncing lightly against her collarbone, her tone casual, dismissive. She keeps herself occupied, she said smoothly. Some little hotels overseas. It's nothing serious, but it keeps her busy. The women tittered polite on the surface but gleeful underneath. One whispered not nearly softly enough. That explains the dress. Another added, every family needs someone grounded, right? Their laughter bubbled like champagne poured too quickly, fizzing before fading, leaving a sticky residue. I smiled thinly, pressing my nails into the stem of my glass until I nearly heard it creak. Inside, the sting burned hotter with each word. They saw me exactly the way my mother wanted them to see me, small, harmless, easy to dismiss. But my attention was already drifting. Back to Karen. She hadn't moved. She wasn't mingling or directing staff. She stood, frozen tablet clutched in her hands, her knuckles pale. Her lips parted as though she had forgotten how to breathe. The faint tremor of her hand made me certain she'd seen it. I knew exactly what had happened. Every month, Rivera Global Holdings sent automatic updates to senior management across our properties, promotions, acquisitions, leadership notes. Tonight, one of those updates had landed. My name, my photo, CEO. It would have lit up her screen just minutes earlier. Her shoulders stiffened. She stared at the tablet, then back at me, then down again, as if the words might change if she looked hard enough. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin pale under the ballroom's golden light. The chatter of Samantha's friends blurred into meaningless noise. Their words bounced against me but never sank in. My focus was locked on Karen, the tiny jerks of her breath, the way her eyes refused to leave me for more than a second. And then it happened. Our eyes met. Just for a flicker of time, but enough. I held her gaze steady. Calm, the kind of calm you learn after years of being underestimated. Then I turned away, lifted my glass, and sipped as though nothing in the world had shifted. But Karen didn't look away. She hesitated, took 2 small steps forward. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, faint beneath the applause ringing from across the hall. She raised her chin, bracing herself like she might approach me. My pulse quickened. She could expose me here now. She could cut the night open with a single sentence. I imagined her walking over, placing that tablet in front of the crowd, and announcing who I really was. But then she froze. Her lips pressed together. She pivoted sharply, turning away, and slipped behind a line of servers carrying trays of appetizers. I exhaled quietly, relief and tension tangled in the same breath. The ballroom kept buzzing, oblivious. Jacob toasted again. Samantha beamed at her guests. My mother's laugh carried lightly through the air. But the world tilted just slightly, because Karen knew. The first crack had formed. My secret, buried so carefully all these years, was no longer completely mine. I lifted my glass, slowly tilted it, so the red liquid caught the chandelier's light. Then I smiled. Outwardly, I was still the forgotten sister tucked at the edge of the celebration. Inwardly, I knew better. Once a crack begins, no matter how small, it never stays hidden. And this one was only the beginning. I stepped out onto the terrace, leaving behind the roar of voices, laughter, and the metallic chime of glasses in the ballroom. The night air hit me hard, cold, sharp, clean. It cut through the heaviness clinging to me after hours of plastered smiles and carefully disguised jabs. I wrapped my arms around myself and leaned against the railing. Below, the city lights shimmered like secrets spilled across the dark, each one pulsing with its own story. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Really breathe. Away from Samantha's sugar-coated mockery, away from my mother's public dismissals, away from Jacob's crowing. Out here, the air didn't judge me. And then I heard it. A low voice, precise and careful, drifting from the far side of the terrace. I turned slightly, eyes adjusting, and saw him, a man in a gray suit that caught the faint glow from the ballroom behind me. Glasses glinted when he shifted. He moved with the composure of someone used to keeping secrets. Ethan. I knew him by sight, Samantha's attorney. He had been at her side through the engagement, always in the background, steady as stone. We'd never spoken directly. But now he was pacing near the stone column, phone pressed tightly to his ear, voice lowered but sharp enough to carry in the stillness. The prenup is signed. Jacob's assets are practically bound. If anything happens, Samantha controls everything. I froze. The words landed like ice, clear and cutting. Jacob, my brother, the golden son, had walked straight into a trap. The same man who had mocked me only hours earlier, who had been the center of my parents' praise since childhood, had just signed away his future. And the cruelest part, they were celebrating it as if it were the victory of a lifetime. Ethan's voice dipped again. Yes. He agreed without hesitation. It's ironclad. Her side made sure of that. A hot rush spread through me, though I kept my body still. My nails dug against the cold railing. The irony was unbearable. My family had dismissed me all night as if I were nothing more than background noise, and yet their chosen star had just handed himself over with a single pen stroke. I bit the inside of my cheek, forcing myself not to gasp, not to move. The call ended. Ethan slid his phone into his pocket, adjusted his glasses, and turned. His eyes widened the moment he saw me. A flicker of alarm crossed his face, but he covered it quickly, his expression smoothing into professional neutrality. Still, his shoulders betrayed a tension he couldn't quite mask. For a beat, we stared at each other. The silence stretched heavy and dangerous. I expected him to brush past me to pretend I wasn't there the way so many others had done that night. But instead, he stepped closer. His polished shoes crunched softly against the gravel. "You shouldn't have heard that," he murmured. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the night air. He hesitated, glancing toward the ballroom, as if to check whether anyone was watching. Then he leaned just slightly toward me, lowering his tone even further. "But maybe you needed to." Jacob tied himself down. "Don't say I told you. Just watch. You'll see." My breath caught. His words weren't cruel, but they cut deep. They weren't advice. They were a warning. Confirmation that the story my family had been spinning all evening was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Jacob wasn't the savior. He was a fool. Ethan straightened, adjusted his tie, and gave me one last unreadable look before turning back toward the ballroom. His figure was quickly swallowed by the glow spilling from the chandeliers inside. I stood frozen, the night pressing harder now. The chill bit deeper, but the real weight came from what I had just learned. My phone tucked in my clutch felt suddenly heavier. Inside it sat contracts worth billions, acquisitions, legal transfers. Proof of an empire no one in that ballroom could imagine belonged to me. And now in my mind I carried something else, a weapon sharper than any contract. The knowledge that Jacob's perfect marriage was a gilded cage and Samantha held the key. I gripped the stone railing nails, pressing deep into its surface. A question rose hot and urgent. Should I expose it? Should I walk back in there and tell every guest that the golden boy had already surrendered everything? The urge pulsed, but I forced it back down. Not yet. Patience had built everything I owned. Every deal, every property, every empire. Brick had been laid because I waited, I timed, I chose my moment. This night would be no different. But the temptation lingered, humming beneath my skin. I let my hands fall from the railing, smoothing the skirt of my dress as though nothing had shifted. My reflection in the glass door caught my eye, poised, composed, unreadable, exactly as I needed to be. Then I turned, stepped back inside. The warmth of the ballroom wrapped around me instantly. The music swelled again, champagne flutes glittered, and laughter rose like it hadn't faltered once. No one noticed that the balance of the night had shifted. They thought the evening still belonged to Jacob and Samantha. But I knew better. Because now, I carried a truth sharp enough to cut through every illusion my family had woven around themselves. And when the time came to use it, it wouldn't just humiliate Jacob. It would unravel everything. I lifted my chin, smoothed the lines of my dress, and walked back into the glow as though I had never left. Let them keep their illusions a little longer. The collapse would taste even sweeter when it came from their own pride. For now, I let the music wash over me and the chatter swirl around. I slid back to my table, my seat near the shadows, the place they thought was safest to put me. I picked up my glass cool against my fingers and took a sip. To anyone watching, I was still the overlooked sister sipping wine quietly at the edge of the celebration. But inside, I was something else entirely. I was the only one holding the story they didn't even know was about to be rewritten. And Ethan's whisper was the first line of that new chapter. I closed the restroom door behind me and the latch clicked softly, sealing me off from the noise outside. The ballroom's laughter and clinking glasses dulled into a faint hum. In here, it was only me, the buzz of fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant, and the polished white tiles reflecting every sharp edge of the room. I walked up to the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, makeup intact, hair pinned just so the navy dress smoothed despite the hours of strain. To the world I looked composed, maybe even elegant. But I saw the truth in my own eyes. Tired, heavy with the weight of years. The kind of eyes that had learned how to absorb every cut without showing the scar. I turned on the faucet, letting cold water rush over my hands. It was sharp biting, and I held them under longer than I needed to, as if the stream could rinse away more than just the surface. Droplets splashed on the porcelain, sliding down in messy streaks. I pressed my palms flat against the counter, grounding myself against the sting of memory. The night's insults replayed without pause. Jacob's smirk when he pointed me toward a corner without a chair. My mother's voice, sweet and polished for the guests, yet slicing me down to a daughter keeping herself busy overseas. Samantha's sugared laughter as she compared me to the servers. And the guests, the way their eyes flicked, the way their chuckles fluttered across tables, as if mocking me was part of the entertainment. I gripped the counter, harder knuckles whitening. They thought they knew my place. They thought they could write the same script again and again, Olivia the forgotten one. Olivia the background. Olivia the failure. But the mirror didn't lie. And tonight, I didn't just see their version of me. I saw another reflection layered over it. The girl who once sat at the family table in silent scholarship letters, ignored victories brushed aside. The young woman who saved coins for a used laptop while Jacob was handed investment money. The sister who watched applause rain down on him while she carried her dreams in secret. And beside her, I saw who I had become. The woman who signed contracts in cities my family had never set foot in. The woman who bought skylines, who negotiated in glass towers, who built something global and unshakable all without their help. Every insult had been a brick. Every dismissal mortar. They thought they'd built a prison around me. Instead, they gave me material for an empire. My chest tightened as those two versions of me clashed in the mirror, past and present, shadow and steel. One question rose above the rest, louder than the ballroom music pulsing through the walls. How much longer will you stay silent? I inhaled deeply. My pulse quickened, but not from shame. It was the rhythm that comes before a choice that changes everything. I pressed my fingertips to the cool glass. For years, their words had pressed me down, pressed me in, shaping me like clay. But now those same words felt like fuel. Their laughter hadn't broken me, it had forged me. Fire doesn't only burn, it tempers. I straightened slowly, shoulders pulling back. My hands curled into fists, then released steady. The tremor that had once lived in me every time I stood in their presence was gone. What filled me now was resolve, clean and sharp. In my head, I heard my own voice, calm, steady, unshakable. Tonight you changed the story. I pulled a paper towel from the dispenser and dried my hands, each motion deliberate. My reflection looked back, no longer diminished by the harsh fluorescent light. Instead, the light framed me, drew out every angle, every line of quiet determination. The doorknob gleamed in front of me. My hand hovered, fingers brushing the cool metal. I wasn't just about to walk back into a wedding. This was an arena. Every chuckle, every raised eyebrow, every whispered slight, they weren't just wounds anymore. They were evidence. And soon I would lay them out piece by piece in front of everyone who had chosen not to see me. Was. I tugged at the shoulders of my dress, smoothing the fabric with care, and lifted my chin. Then I turned the knob. The sound of the ballroom crashed back instantly, music swelling, glasses clinking, laughter spilling like a flood. Golden light poured into the restroom, warm and blinding after the sterile glow I had left behind. I paused at the threshold, caught between two worlds. One was the quiet room behind me where years of pain had pressed me against a mirror until I found resolve. The other was ahead, bright and crowded the stage where my family thought the story was theirs to tell. I stepped forward. My heels struck the polished floor with a rhythm that echoed louder in my ears than the music itself. Not hesitant, not timid, intentional. People barely noticed me weaving through the tables. They were too busy raising glasses to Jacob, too eager to laugh at Samantha's carefully crafted charm. Let them. Their blindness was my shield for now. I reached my lonely table, the one shoved near the service doors, the seat they thought fit me best. I pulled the chair back and sat down, spine straight, head high. Outwardly, I was the same Olivia pushed to the margins. But inside, something had shifted beyond repair. This wasn't Jacob's night anymore. Not to me. This was my stage. And very soon the spotlight would turn. When I pushed open the ballroom doors again, the noise hit me full force, music chatter, the clinking of glasses. It was as though nothing had changed. Guests were laughing, waiters were weaving between tables, and chandeliers blazed above. But inside me, everything was different. I wasn't walking back as the invisible sister. I was walking back with a decision burning quietly beneath my skin. I moved toward the corner table, the same forgotten spot I had been sent to earlier. I placed my glass down, pretending to blend back into the noise. That's when I noticed him. A young manager stood by the service station, a tablet in his hands. His suit looked new, but it didn't quite fit, the sleeves too long, the shoulders a little wide. He was scrolling, distracted, until his eyes suddenly froze. He blinked, looked up at me, then back down at the screen. His hands trembled slightly. I knew. Instinct told me exactly what he had just seen. He drew in a breath, sharp and unsteady, then spoke louder than the quartet's strings. His words sliced through the music, through the chatter, through every pretense in the room. "Welcome, Ms. Rivera." If we had known the owner was here, the sound cracked across the ballroom. Silence fell so fast it felt physical. Forks hovered midair. The music faltered, a wrong note hanging awkwardly before the musicians stopped altogether. Every head turned, every pair of eyes following the invisible line from the young man to me. I didn't move. Not yet. Whispers rose like smoke. Ms. Rivera, owner. Did he say Rivera Global? Across the room, I caught Jacob's face first. His confident grin was gone, replaced by confusion and something dangerously close to fear. Samantha's mouth parted, but no words came out. Her fingers dug into her gown like she could hold herself steady by clutching fabric. And my mother Dolores dropped her glass. Champagne spilled in a golden streak across the white tablecloth, seeping into the fabric like an ugly stain. The manager realized too late what he'd done. His face flushed red, his lips forming half words of apology as he fumbled with his tablet. But it was too late. The truth was already circling the room, feeding on shock impossible to take back. I had waited for this. For years I had imagined revealing myself on my terms. But the world rarely follows your script. And now, with the eyes of the entire ballroom locked on me, I understood I couldn't hide again. The moment was here. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. The sound scraped against the floor, sharp in the silence. I stood. It was strange, the room seemed to make space for me, though no one moved. A circle of invisible distance formed as though my very presence demanded it. I took one breath, then another, and then I spoke, my voice steady, carried by the hush around me. "Yes," I said. "I am the owner of this hotel." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples spread instantly. Gasps, sharp intakes of breath, voices tumbling over one another. Jacob's hand tightened around his champagne flute. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the bravado he had worn all night. Samantha clutched his arm, whispering something quick, her eyes darting toward the guests, then back to me. Her face had gone pale. And my mother sat frozen, staring at me like she no longer recognized the daughter she had dismissed. The guests weren't subtle. They leaned closer to one another, whispering in tones they thought were discreet. "She runs Rivera Global." That's billions, isn't it? How did the family not know I let them whisper? I let the truth settle in their mouths like a taste they couldn't spit out. The manager who had spoken stood rooted to the spot, his tablet still in his hands. He looked at me with something between awe and terror. I gave him the slightest nod, enough to calm the panic in his eyes. He had ripped the curtain open, but it was my stage now. I stepped forward, the heels of my shoes clicking against the polished floor. Each sound echoed louder than it should have been. This hotel, I continued softer now, but no less firm, is only one part of what I own. A wave of murmurs rushed through the room. It wasn't boasting. It was the truth, bare and undeniable. Relatives who once brushed past me now stared speechless. Friends of Samantha's, the ones who had laughed earlier at her cutting jokes, kept their eyes down. The balance of power in that ballroom shifted in real time, the air heavy with the weight of what they had ignored. Jacob finally managed to speak. "Olivia." His voice cracked, carrying none of the arrogance he had aimed at me before. He looked like a man trying to find the floor under his feet. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. The silence spoke louder. Samantha's smile was gone, replaced by tight calculation. She held Jacob's arm like an anchor, her nails pressing into his sleeve. Her expression said it all. She was scrambling, trying to measure how much this revelation threatened her perfect night. And my mother, still staring, still silent, her pearls slightly twisted, her face pale. She had spent years reducing me to hotel jobs overseas, to the daughter who didn't measure up. Tonight she had to face the truth. The daughter she dismissed was the woman standing at the center of her son's wedding, reshaping the air itself with a single sentence. I didn't need to say more. The ballroom erupted, chatter bouncing from table to table, disbelief spreading faster than fire. Some guests stole glances at me like I was a headline they hadn't expected to see. Others leaned in closer, eager to be part of this discovery, desperate to claim they had known me all along. But I stood still. My back straight, chin lifted, hands resting lightly at my sides. Calm. Collected. I wasn't hiding anymore. For years I had been the shadow. Tonight the shadow had stepped into the light. The room wasn't laughing now. The room was watching. And this was only the beginning. The ballroom had gone still after the young manager's slip. The chandeliers kept glowing, their crystals scattering light across faces that looked frozen. The music had cut off mid-note. What remained was silence, broken only by the sound of someone setting a glass too hard on a table. Dozens of eyes fixed on me, some wide, some curious, some already calculating what this meant. I lifted my glass and walked to the center of the room. My heels tapped steady against the marble, each step measured. I didn't rush. I didn't flinch. The light from above found me sharp and relentless, but for the first time that night I let it. I stopped in front of them, Jacob, Samantha, Dolores, Robert. My family. The ones who had written me off turned me into a background. My voice came low, steady, carrying through the hush. "The way you treated me tonight," I said, "is no different from the way you've treated me my entire life." The words landed like stones. Guests shifted in their seats. A few leaned closer, hungry to hear. Jacob tugged at his collar, his face blotched red. He glanced at Samantha as though she could script his next line. Samantha smiled tightly, but her grip on his arm was too strong, nails biting into fabric. My mother looked from table to table, hunting for a way out. My father's brow was drawn, his lips a firm line, but no sound left him. I didn't pause. I wouldn't let them catch their breath. I am not a hotel clerk. I am not the invisible daughter you pretend I am. I am the owner of Rivera Global Holdings, an empire that spans 30 countries worth tens of billions. The room broke open. Gasps, murmurs. My name whispered like recognition dawning from headlines. Rivera Global, the CEO. That's her. Jacob clenched his jaw, stepping forward. "Olivia, this isn't the right time," I cut across him. "And when would be the right time, Jacob? After you mock me again, after you shove me into a corner so you can shine alone." The guest's hushed eyes swiveling back to him. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Samantha's hand tightened on his sleeve. Her polished composure cracked at the edges, her smile twitching, slipping. She had reigned over this evening until now, but her crown was tilting bead by bead. Then it came, the sharp break of glass. My mother's wine flute had slipped from her hand. Red spilled across the marble, spreading like shame she couldn't mop up. Her pearls sat askew on her chest as she stared at me, her hands trembling. My father finally tried to speak. The words caught in his throat, strangled before they formed. He looked at me, then at the crowd, then dropped his gaze. Even he couldn't shield them from this moment. I let the silence stretch heavy before sweeping my eyes across them all. In your eyes, I was the dreamer, the failure. The daughter is not worth the family's pride. But while you ignored me, I was building. While you lived on borrowed names, I carved one that belongs only to me. Guests rose from their seats. Faces once smug now looked respectful, even awed. I saw it clearly, the shift, the reversal. I turned, facing Jacob and Samantha directly. You think marrying into wealth gives you power? You think attaching yourself to status will lift you higher? Jacob, you lowered yourself when you tried to lower me. And Samantha, my gaze locked with hers, steady. You never even saw the trap you signed your name to. Gasps rippled again. Samantha's lips parted, but no sound came. Her glow had drained away, leaving her pale, clutching her gown like a lifeline. I set my glass down on the nearest table. The sound was deliberate, final. Tonight I won't just reclaim my seat at this wedding. I reclaim the place that was always mine. Under the weight of her own heel, Dolores crushed the shattered glass, the crunch echoing across the floor. It sounded like a verdict. The ballroom stirred with whispers. Phones lifted. My name, Rivera Global, passed from one mouth to another like a spark catching flame. And there, beneath the chandeliers, my family stood exposed. Jacob is silent. Samantha unraveling. My mother is trembling. My father mute. The fracture had come. The family that had dismissed me for years had splintered in full view of everyone who had once believed their version of me. And I, no longer a shadow, stood at the center. I was still standing in the middle of the ballroom, the chandeliers pouring light down on me, every pair of eyes locked tight. The silence was so sharp it had a hum to it. I heard a fork clatter against a plate near the back, the sound magnified in the hush. My family. Those who had always demanded the highest seats, the loudest praise, sat stiff pale, scrambling for a way to patch what could no longer be hidden. Jacob leapt up first. His laugh came out too high, too loud, brittle as glass. "This is just a misunderstanding," he said, his voice cracking at the edges. My sister was joking. She likes to exaggerate. The words fell flat. Not a chuckle, not a murmur of agreement. Just silence. Samantha dug her nails into his sleeve, her voice pitched low but sharp enough to carry. "She's emotional. It's her brother's big day. You know how some people get carried away." The bridesmaids tittered uneasily, their eyes darting to the guests around them. Unsure whether to laugh or stay silent, they ended up looking small. Dolores. My mother clutched her pearls as if they might anchor her. "We've always been so proud of Olivia." She rushed out. Perhaps everyone misunderstood her tone. Her pearls trembled against her chest. So did her voice. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Too many had heard too much. My father, Robert, stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth, as though the weave of the fabric held answers. His lips pressed so tight they were bloodless. He didn't defend me, but he didn't defend them either. And in his silence, I saw the truth he had no shield left to offer. I let them twist, the three of them, flailing in front of everyone who once believed their lies. Then I stepped forward, my chin lifting, my voice steady. "A misunderstanding," I said, the word cutting through the hush. "My whole life has been your misunderstanding. From dinners where you forgot I was there to conversations where my work was treated like scraps. You want to dismiss me again tonight? No. There's no room for that anymore." A ripple ran through the guests. Heads nodded. Murmurs shifted. The weight of my words carried farther than theirs ever could. Jacob's face burned crimson. His jaw twitched, as if fighting to keep his teeth from grinding. Samantha leaned into him, whispering fiercely, but he shook her off. He looked at me with open fury, as if I had torn down the stage he had built for himself. And then it happened. From the front, a man in a navy suit stood. He was tall, his presence commanding without effort. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but every syllable rang like a gavel. "If this is how your family treats someone like Olivia," he said, "then my company cannot move forward with Powell and Samantha Group." The room gasped. Dolores froze mid-breath. Jacob's head snapped around so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Samantha paled, her painted smile collapsing. That man wasn't just another guest. He was the executive Jacob had bragged about for weeks, the contract Jacob pinned his future on, the deal he thought would secure his rise. "No, please wait," Jacob stammered. His voice cracked again, desperate now. "This is separate. Our partnership has nothing to do with her." The man lifted a hand, calm but unyielding. "On the contrary, it has everything to do with her. If you cannot respect your own sister, how can you respect an alliance with us?" The blow landed with precision. Jacob staggered back into his seat, the fight draining out of him. His shoulders slumped. His glass rattled in his grip, the wine trembling inside it, mirroring the unravel of his confidence. Guests murmured louder words, spilling over each other. Some turned their heads deliberately, not bothering to hide their judgment anymore. The tide had shifted, and it had shifted against him. Samantha leaned close, her whisper fierce slicing through clenched teeth. "Fix this!" But her voice was tight with fear, and she knew as well as I did there was no fixing this. Not tonight. I stood still, my silence louder than their excuses. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't pleaded. The truth had stepped forward on its own, and they were powerless to smother it. I breathed slowly, letting the satisfaction settle. Not a rush, not a spark, but a deep weight easing from me. For years, I carried their dismissal, their condescension, their easy cruelty. Tonight I carried nothing. Around me the ballroom shifted again. The quiet had dissolved into noise, whispers, flying questions, rising speculation buzzing like bees set loose. My family drowned in it, gasping for explanations they couldn't deliver. Jacob's hands shook so badly he could barely lift his glass. Samantha's mask was gone, her lips drawn thin, her eyes darting. Dolores's pearls lay crooked across her chest, her composure broken. Robert sat motionless, as if the only way to survive was to vanish into stillness. And I, calm, steady, watched them choke on the fire they had lit themselves. Sometimes justice doesn't need your hand to push it forward. Sometimes it walks right into the room, sits down at the table, and does the work for you. I stepped back, leaving them in the center of the blaze. The chandelier still glowed, the music still silent, and for the first time I was the one who didn't flinch from the light. The aftermath wasn't mine to bear. It was theirs. The ballroom was still, like someone had pressed pause on the entire night. The chandeliers glimmered, but the light felt harsher now, exposing every strained smile, every nervous glance. Jacob stood frozen, his hand still clutching Samantha's. She looked as if the ground might give way beneath her feet. Whispers swirled among the guests, a low tide of disbelief and curiosity. The hotel manager rushed forward, bowing slightly, his voice almost trembling. "Ms. Rivera," he said, "please allow us to prepare the VIP seat for you, right at the center beside our most honored guests." The words echoed across the ballroom. Eyes followed me, waiting. For the first time all evening, the very people who had laughed, dismissed, and cast me aside now stood eager for my approval. Jacob cleared his throat, trying to recover. His tuxedo still looked perfect, but his composure had cracked. "Olivia," he said in a strained voice, "it would be best, for the family, if you sit with us at the main table." Samantha, ever the performer, forced a delicate smile. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes betrayed panic. "Yes, Olivia. Why don't we just move forward? Tonight is about love, family, and celebration." Their words dangled in the air, heavy with desperation. I stood there, hands calm at my sides, feeling the weight of a choice pressing down. I could accept the invitation, sit in the chair they had scrambled to offer, and smooth over the chaos. I could let them rewrite the story. Pretend tonight had never exposed their cruelty. Or I could choose differently. My breath came steady. I let the silence stretch long enough that the crowd leaned in restless. Then I smiled, slow, deliberate, and shook my head. "No," I said softly, but the word cut through the room like crystal striking glass. The manager blinked, startled. Jacob's face darkened. Samantha's smile faltered into a tight line. I turned, walked past the glittering tables, and returned to the same corner where this night had begun. The table with no assigned place card, no silk cloth, no acknowledgement. The poor corner, as my brother had once called it. I pulled out the same modest chair and sat down, back straight, chin lifted. But this time something had shifted. One by one, the hotel staff began to appear behind me. The young servers who had rushed nervously with trays. The hostess who had greeted guests at the door. The managers in their pressed suits. Even the security at the far end of the room. They lined up silently, forming a quiet wall of loyalty. Not because they were ordered to, but because they knew. They knew who I was. From my seat in the corner, I now had a throne. Not made of gold, not draped in velvet, but built from the respect of those who truly work to keep this place alive. The ballroom erupted with murmurs. Some guests gasped softly. Others leaned forward, whispering, their eyes darting between me and the VIP table, where Jacob and Samantha sat stiff and pale. The contrast was undeniable. Jacob tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. He tugged at his cufflinks, his jaw tight. Samantha pressed her hands together in her lap, nails digging into her skin, but her face gave her away. She was humiliated not by a cruel word from me, but by the image unfolding before everyone's eyes. The so-called important table looked suddenly small, irrelevant. The real power sat in the corner, draped not in silk or candlelight, but in quiet authority. I let the moment breathe, let the weight of it settle on every person in the room. Then I lifted my glass, not champagne, just water, and raised it slightly. In families, I said, my voice even clear sometimes, you have to rise and claim the seat they refuse to give you. A hush fell. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. "I've found mine," I continued. My gaze moved across the room, past Jacob's rigid frame, past Samantha's trembling smile, past my mother's wide, stunned eyes. Not because anyone handed it to me, but because I built it. The staff behind me stood taller, their presence like a living testament to every word. Guests shifted, some nodding slowly, others looking down as if ashamed, forever laughing along earlier in the night. Jacob's face was pale with anger he couldn't release. Samantha's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes glistening with the sting of defeat. My mother gripped the edge of the table as though it might keep her from collapsing. My father remained stone still, but his eyes darted anywhere but mine. I placed the glass back down unhurried and folded my hands together. For the first time, I wasn't standing in the shadows of this family. For the first time, I didn't need their table, their validation, or their seat. Because the truth was simple, the chair they had denied me had become the most powerful seat in the room. And as the murmurs grew louder, I leaned back, calm, unshaken, watching the empire of illusions they had built crumble quietly around them. Then slowly, I let my eyes sweep the room one last time, and I spoke not to my family, not to the guests, but to the space beyond, to those who had ever been pushed aside. "You've seen me tonight," I said softly. "Now tell me, have you ever been treated as if you were less in your own family? As if your worth didn't exist? And what did you do to claim your place again?" I let the question hang there, an open door, a mirror for every listener. Because tonight wasn't just about me. It was about every person who had ever been left standing without a seat until they created